Rogue Angels is a 1 to 4 player cooperative game that we've seen inspired many times before, inspired by classic games such as Gloomhaven, inspired by role-player adventures, taking the gameplay of those great, fantastic board games and using some grand influence from one of the greatest PC and Xbox games ever, the game of Mass Effect. But is this game of Rogue Angels a game that you need to add to your collection? Come on back after the break for my full review of Rogue Angels, the game. Hey everybody, welcome out to the Shelf Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at the game of Rogue Angels. Now, Rogue Angels is a 1 to 4 player cooperative game, a space opera themed game, a game of decision, a game of choices, a game where players are going to control 1 to 4 heroes going through this grand campaign. It's a campaign with about 40 different adventures, but it's more than just 40 adventures. You understand what I mean in just a second. But it's 40 adventures out of 70 where players are going to be making choices very much influenced from classic space, sci-fi, space opera, space games that we may have played before on the PC and on the Xbox and on our video game systems, but it's a space game that we have not seen too many times in the board game genre at all. Basically what Rogue Angels seeks to do is to take inspiration from the really great, fantastic game of Gloomhaven, a game which is a cooperative fantasy dungeon crawl where the idea is players are going to take their heroes, level up their heroes, go through this grand campaign, and the campaign is designed to be this long campaign where your decisions are going to affect how the campaign is going to play out. Every one of our heroes has their own little goals they're trying to work out, and those heroes may actually end up leaving the campaign and moving on. Well, that's the game of Gloomhaven. Additionally, you take the game of Role Player. It's a story-based game. It's a game where your decisions are going to evolve through a story tree, where you're also evolving your heroes, gaining the ability to go through a story where your stories make a difference. Why am I mentioning these two games when I'm talking about Rogue Angels? Because the game of Rogue Angels takes some fantastic inspiration from those two games and marries it with a really awesome sci-fi drama style game, much akin to classic sci-fi dramas that we've seen and enjoyed many times before. Basically, what Rogue Angels does is it's basically, yeah, we can basically say this is a dungeon crawler in space. But it's so much more because every time you play the game of Rogue Angels, and you can see this if you watch my playthrough, I actually do a playthrough where I really show exactly what I'm about to talk about here. But in the game of Rogue Angels, when you play these missions, you have to make decisions, and your decisions are going to matter because in the game of Rogue Angels, you have 20 heroes that come with the game, but in every single game, you can play through 1 to 4 heroes. You're going to level up your heroes, you're going to evolve your heroes by taking stickers, modifying cards, and I guess I should really say this quickly. If you didn't watch any of the other videos, Rogue Angels is a card-based sci-fi dungeon crawler where you're moving your heroes across a spaceship, derelicts, planets, everything that you've seen in a sci-fi game, movie, TV show, video game, whatever before, it's probably going to be represented here in a really good way. But you're going to be going through like a basic dungeon crawl where you have objectives in every single mission. But like I said, what this game has done is you are going to be evolving a story with 1 to 4 heroes who are going to live, and they also may die based on your decisions. And your decisions are going to influence other factions in the game. Your decisions are going to influence things that are going to happen. And these are decisions that you have to live with, much like the classic game of Mass Effect. When you make a decision to go ahead and affect a faction, your decision to affect that faction is permanent. It's going to add scars on your heroes. It's going to add things that are going to linger that are going to affect the following storylines and even the individual adventures themselves. Let's give you a really good example if you don't watch my playthrough video. And you really should watch it because this is going to really accentuate what I'm going to say here. In the second playthrough video I play through, you see the heroes have this choice where they're going to enter this room and they have to make a literal life and death decision. Watch the playthrough. And during this decision, the decision they make, if they make the life decision, everything that happens from the rest of that adventure is completely different than what happens if they make the death decision. Literally 100% different. If you make the life decision, not to make spoilers, you literally have to do something entirely different than what you have to do if you make the death decision. Totally different gameplay, and this is what is so awesome about the game of Rogue Angels. These wonderful decisions accentuate what is so fun about these great dungeon crawlers, whether it happens to be a fantasy dungeon crawler, And I'm sure we're all getting burnt out on fantasy dungeon crawlers at this point. That's what is really great about Rogue Angels. Space allows you to tell different stories. If you don't believe me, go look at Star Wars, then go look at Lord of the Rings. They're both big, giant operas. You have a space opera, you have a fantasy opera, but the things that happen in Lord of the Rings are really different than the things that happen in Star Wars because different milieus to allow you to tell different stories. They have their things that always fit with those milieus. Space has space stuff. Fantasy always has fantasy stuff. Now, of course, you can always look at the Pathfinder versus Starfinder, and we know that Starfinder is basically D&D in space, but generally speaking, most of the time when we look at these kind of storylines and everything like that, space has a different feel to it than fantasy, and that's one of the great things that I really enjoyed about the game of Rogue Angels. I felt like I was playing a space game, not just because I'm flying around a spaceship, landing on a planet, landing over on a space station, landing in like a rogue's den in space or something like that, but it has its own little feel, and I think they did a really good job with Rogue Angels by giving you that space opera feel. And I also really, really appreciate the fact that my decisions mattered. I literally felt like my decisions mattered because the game makes those decisions matter. There are many times when I'm playing through, and again, my experience with Rogue Angels is extremely limited. Please don't think I'm being an expert on the game of Rogue Angels. This review is 100% based on a prototype copy of the game where I basically got to read the first, I think I got to read the first 8 adventures, but got to play through the first couple. The third one, I had to do a whole bunch of, oh my gosh, terrible, horrible. I took a square piece of paper and wrote stats on, just so I can play through the adventure, just so I can feel like I can talk about this game properly. Because I didn't want to be one of those people who act like I know everything about the game when I only played it once. I played this game, well, if you include the learning games and everything, I probably have about 10 games into this where I literally took the first 3 adventures and played through them multiple times just to see the paths, the different entrances, the different exits, and to get a feel of how the game is, because I really wanted to talk about this because this is what so much attracted me to the game. The fact that I feel like this is a game where my decisions matter, and that is what I really, really enjoyed. It feels like an RPG in a box, which a lot of games like to make that claim, but then fall flat on their face. And I'm not going to point any fingers, dissent. But these are games that are where you're so railroaded into this narrative that they shove it down your throat. I never felt like that in the game of Rogue Angels. I literally felt like when I made a decision, it was agonizing because I knew it was going to affect the storyline. And again, like I said, I must re-impress upon you when I'm talking about this. I'm definitely talking about the first 7 adventures. I think it's 7. Oh my gosh, I'm going to look like an idiot if I get this number wrong. Oh well, just make fun of me later. But literally the decisions that I saw mattered. I saw the way my heroes were evolving mattered. I felt like my decisions were evolving my heroes and gave a very, very strong RPG feel. Something I so greatly enjoyed. But that's enough about how Rogue Angel makes me feel. Let's talk about the gameplay, because I've had plenty of games I played which made me feel cool, but I never wanted to play the games again because the mechanics were terrible. Luckily, that's not the case here for Rogue Angels. I've mentioned Gloomhaven multiple times in this entire video series. I've also mentioned Role Player multiple times in this video series because these are games I've played recently, or at least within the past year and a half, that have been very positive experiences for me, and I've enjoyed them for their own individual things. I enjoy the fact that Gloomhaven was a very strong card-based game. Every time I played Gloomhaven, it kind of gave me like a more modernized feel of Mage Knight, which is a game that I enjoy immensely. Now, I'm saying modern in a way that may sound like a negative, and it's not, because I still love Mage Knight. I still play Mage Knight quite a bit, but Mage Knight is its own individual game. Every time I pull out the game of Mage Knight, I throw it on the table, pull out all the components. We play the game Mage Knight, it's its own individual story. That wasn't the case with Gloomhaven. When I played the game of Gloomhaven, I had the smart card play of Mage Knight, but I had this evolving storyline which made me feel like I was playing a role-playing game. The game of Rogue Angels does the same thing, because in the game of Rogue Angels, this is a 1 to 4 player game where every single player is going to, at the start of the campaign, we're going to go ahead and pick a hero. Now the game only does play up to 4 players, and if you're playing this as purely as a solo game, that does mean you have to control a minimum of 2 heroes. You could control up to 4. I wouldn't recommend doing it because there are some really smart card play in this game, and it's going to get very challenging to control that many heroes, but you're required to play at least 2 heroes. I cannot see any way to play 1 hero, and I don't think you'd want to do it anyways. But every single player is going to pick their own hero, and the hero is going to have their own storyline, their own secret quests that they're trying to evolve, and they're going to have their own smart card play with this hard starting hand of cards, which is mostly unique to every single hero. You have your more stealthy hero, you have your more hero who's just really there just to tear things up, and you have your heroes in between, some that have the ability to get around the board much better, jetpacks, you have some that are more of your long-range snipers. A lot of these things that are tropes that you can see in like a sci-fi game, which is really cool here. But you're going to play this game, the way the game is going to be played is by smart card play. Every single turn, every single player on their turn, they get to play up to 2 cards from their hand. And the cards they play are going to be played underneath their character sheet, and every single card has a timer on it. Now, the more powerful cards have a higher timer number of a number 4, and your quicker cards have a less powered cards have a timer of 0. And when you play these cards, 0-time cards pop right back in your hand immediately, but 4-time cards only come back in your hand after 4 rest periods have occurred. Now, the nice thing about the game is every single player at the end of their turn, they get 1 free rest period, but you also get 2 actions. Now, your actions could be to play a card or to take a rest period. You may want to take one of those rest periods to help get those cards back in your hand quickly, but you never really have the time to do that because the adventures are evolving, and these are not stagnant adventures. These are adventures that feel like they're very organic. These are very evolving adventures where you need to be constantly making decisions, and you can't rest on your laurels. You must go out there and force the narrative to not kill you by standing still and waiting for the narrative to come towards you. Because this is a game where the narrative is constantly going. Matter of fact, if you watch my playthrough video, you see that very much at the start, I had a decision. I could go and hack the terminals. Wasn't really going to work because I brought the Bruiser team. Or I can go attack the robots, which I very much did. And that shows the evolving organic narrative of the game. You don't feel like the narrative is being kind of crammed down your throat and you have to play it the way the designers wrote their narrative. It feels like the designer said, okay, here's a story. Here's 5 things you can do. Pick one. And then of those 5 things, those are going to evolve into their own individual branches. And those little storylines are going to evolve into their own individual branches, which is something that's really, really cool. It's a little bit very in-depth, and it may be something that may frustrate some players a little bit because you may get a little bit of paralysis going on because you're going to be like, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to be stuck with a decision. Yes, you are. And that's why it's an evolving role-playing game in a box, because you are playing a role, and the story that you are evolving is a story you're going to have to live with. Now, one of the really cool positives about the game when we talk about the gameplay itself is a long time ago, there was a ludology podcast that talked about negative gameplay and taking things away versus rewarding players for smart gameplay. And this is definitely one of those games that I feel rewards you for smart gameplay and doesn't feel like it's creating negative situations. Even the dice mechanic in the game, just to use a really good example of what I'm saying right here, the dice never punish you. Now, you may look at the game and say, oh my gosh, the game has dice in it. But these are dice that reward you versus dice that punish you. Even though you're going to be rolling the dice, and in your mind may think dice punish you, the way the mechanics are designed, you feel like the dice are rewarding you every time you play. Because you may play a card that says move, and then you're going to roll the dice. And the dice may give you a little bit more move. Or you may play a heal card, and the card will say roll the die, and you may get some additional heal. Well, you'll play the heal card, and you roll the die itself. And the dice give you movement, and you say, strategically, this may actually be even better because now I can take this 1 point of movement, move over here away from the bad guy, and then heal. So the game has created this positive narrative where it doesn't feel like the dice are punishing you. They're always giving you nice, subtle rewards based on your decisions and adding in extra powers. It's a really nice thing to say. It's a nice little, very subtle thing, but it's subtle and it's cool. Now, additionally, earlier I talked about the gameplay of Gloomhaven. I am going to use some comparisons between the 2 games because I know a lot of people are going to see the similarities and they're going to wonder how the similarities and the differences pan out. It's more than beauty being skin deep here or just different themes here. The games do play very, very differently here. One thing I really appreciate about the game of Rogue Angels is, unlike in Gloomhaven, as you burn your cards are slowly removed from the adventure. Sure, you get the cards back at the end of the adventure, but as you're burning through the cards, they're disappearing. It goes back to what I said a little bit ago, where it feels like the game is punishing you for your decisions. Unlike Gloomhaven and the game of Rogue Angels, it feels like it's rewarding you and you want to play smart with your cards. Now, I understand that Gloomhaven was designed that way, but if you think about it psychologically, it's much more rewarding. I feel like the game is rewarding you for your decisions instead of punishing you. Stick with me a second here. In the game of Rogue Angels, when I play a card down, I know that card is going to come back. So I'm going to look at my cards and I want to play my cards smartly. When I play the game of Gloomhaven, when I play a card, I'm going to go, well, there may be a chance I'm never going to get this card back. So maybe I don't want to play this card yet. Maybe I want to play this card over here. Well, no, if I lose that card, that may also influence me. And then I may be 45 minutes in the scenario and go, oh my gosh, I need this card that's already gone. I can't get it back. Rogue Angels never does that. It doesn't punish. It rewards you for your decisions. And that's a really good feeling. And additionally, one really, really great thing I just have to mention about the game of Rogue Angels, and you've probably gotten this point from me already, but I have at least 20 dungeon crawlers in my collection. I have a lot of dungeon crawlers because I enjoy the concept of dungeon crawlers. They're fun. I like the narrative. I like the idea of just doing the standard dungeon crawl. It feels really good. But looking at my entire collection of dungeon crawlers, I would say almost every of them pretty much has a fantasy theme to them. I don't have a single space-themed dungeon crawler in my collection. And matter of fact, if I actually think about our current hobby right now, I can only think about 2 actual space-themed dungeon crawlers, while I can think about dozens and dozens of fantasy dungeon crawlers. It's kind of nice to kind of break the mold a little bit and play a sci-fi dungeon crawler because they do feel a little bit different. Now, I think gamers who are looking for smart gameplay, good strategy, an evolving storyline, and something that's going to break the fantasy mold here, those are the players who are really going to enjoy the game of Rogue Angels. Players who want to play a game where their decisions are going to feel like they're rewarded, players who have deep strategies, and players who feel like their decisions in a storyline are going to matter. Those are the players who are going to enjoy Rogue Angels quite a bit. Now, there are some negatives here to throw in here. The game is a legacy game. The game is designed for you to play a hero, and your decisions can kill off your heroes, and that may cause a little bit of heartburn for some people, especially if you're like 20 missions into a game and the final scars landed on your hero is dead. There's no way to bring back your hero. There's no retconning. Well, I guess you can always cheat and say, no, that final hit didn't hit them because retcon or something like that. You could do that, but if you're playing the game as the game is designed, your heroes are going to die off, and that may cause a little bit of heartburn for some people. Additionally, it is truly a legacy game here. This is a game where we're going to be putting stickers on cards, which, if you look at it from the grand scheme of things, is really cool because every hero has their own individual cards, and we're going to be adding stickers to our cards, individualizing our heroes, so every single player is going to play through a storyline with the same hero slightly differently because of how we're going to be evolving our heroes, but we're adding stickers to our cards, we're marking up our character sheets, we're doing permanent changes to the game. Now, my understanding is there is actually going to be a reset pack that's going to be produced, available, something like that. This is coming out to Kickstarter. There's some things that I have to make assumptions here. This is going to be one of them. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a reset pack included somehow for the players who are really bothered by that legacy idea. But, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not a huge fan of legacy games. I don't enjoy Pandemic Legacy or any of those legacy games where it's one and done because I don't like that idea. But I think that there's been a nice balance been kind of achieved here with Rogue Angels. You have a legacy game that behooves you, incentivizes you, and gives you plenty of reasons to go back and play the campaign again. 20 heroes, you're only going to play with 4 of them max, and if heroes die off, maybe just on the far end of things, let's say everybody has their heroes die off twice. That's still only going through 8 heroes. That guarantees you still have 12 more heroes to come through. I'm sorry, math is hard. I guess if heroes died off twice, that'd be 12 heroes, leaving 8. Oh well, just make fun of my math skills in the comments down below. But you get my point. You're going to be able to play through this game and still have heroes you have not experienced. Additionally, you're only going to go through about 40-ish missions every time you play through an entire campaign. This entire game has at least 70 missions, so your decisions are going to be different. Look at my playthrough again. That decision I make was a permanent decision. If I play the campaign again, I can make the other decision, see where that storyline, where those routes and where those forks are going to take me. That's a really cool thing. It adds the reason for you to want to go back and play again. So while this is a legacy game where you're going to be damaging components, destroying components, whatever term you want to use, making these components permanently change, there's going to be most likely a reset kit, and there is going to be enough reasons to go back and play this game again and see different story paths. Now, normally I like to talk about game components a little bit more, but the unfortunate thing here is that this game was basically a prototype that was sent to me. So I just want to cover a few things about the components that I actually really enjoy, things I like, things that are really, really cool. I like the inspiration from Jaws Online and also from games from Red Raven, such as Near and Far, and other games that we're starting to see this is becoming a lot more common. But instead of having to deal with a whole bunch of dungeon tiles where every time you play the game, you're spending 20 minutes just organizing these dungeon tiles, or you're playing Shadows of Brimstone, you're taking an hour to organize all the dungeon tiles. Sorry, just a personal pet peeve about Shadows of Brimstone, getting way too bloated at this point. But I like the idea that when you play this game, it's going to tell you to turn to page 20 of a mission book. You're going to flip open the spiral-bound mission book. You're going to look at page 20 as maybe it's going to be a ship layout. Maybe it's going to be a planet. Maybe it's going to be a jail breakout. I don't know. But it's going to be very nice adding to the quick setup. I also like the fact that we get these nice little turning bases where you track the hit points, track the damage of all of our heroes. That's a very nice touch. The artwork for the game looks really good so far. There's lots of great positives I can already say about the game itself. Additionally, every single one of the adventures that come with the game is probably going to run maybe an hour to an hour and a half, maybe a little longer when you start getting into more of the evolved ones. The early missions were definitely pretty much clearing up in about 45 minutes for me, which felt like was a pretty good time frame. This does mean that you're going to get about 50 to 60 hours of gameplay out of a single campaign. And since you can play this game twice via 2 campaigns, that does mean you're going to get about 120 hours of gameplay out of this game. And it's going to play out differently every time you play this game. The bottom line here is, this looks like a great evolution of gameplay that we've seen over the past couple of years. You have a great game that's cooperative, a great story-based game where your decisions are going to matter. It's going to be an evolving storyline and reasons to go back. And you're also going to get a good value here because you're going to get at least 100 hours of gameplay out of this box. What more can you really want from a game these days? I mean, there's a lot of us who have been owning Gloomhaven who probably have not even finished the complete Gloomhaven campaign yet because it's just so darn big. Okay, some of us have finished it because, you know, we like the storyline. But 100 to 120 hours of gameplay for 4 players to play a cooperative game is a wonderful, great thing in my book. I think that's a great baseline for any game out there these days. There's many of us who have games that we probably only get about 20 hours of gameplay out of, so to say 100 to 120 hours, that actually seems fantastic. Matter of fact, my only real complaint about the game is that this has the same problem that Gloomhaven does, and that's a problem that the game only goes up to 4 players. It's one of the problems I had with Gloomhaven, and it's one of the reasons why I was not ever able to finish my Gloomhaven campaign with my friends. When I played my Gloomhaven campaign, we basically had to stop the game halfway through. Some of us had to get our own copies of Gloomhaven, and then we all played through more of a solo game. That's one of the biggest negatives I have here. And it's something I would love to see is somebody bring out one of these campaign-based games that plays up to 5 players. My gaming group is always 5 to 7 players. Now, granted, usually when we have more than 5 players at the table, we usually pick a good war game to play, or we pick an RPG. But gosh, it'd be so great if I play one of these campaign games with my full table complement of 5 players instead of telling some of my friends, hey, you guys can't come over today because we're trying to finish up the Gloomhaven campaign. Or in this case, hey, some of you guys can't come over and play board games today because guess what? We're finishing up our Rogue Angels campaign. It would be great if these games would go up to 5 players. It would just be such a fantastic addition. But beyond that, Rogue Angels is a game I'm definitely looking forward to.